Okay, so we're going to be talking about the quadratic formula. And this happens when we've got an equation in this form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So we have to move all of our terms to one side and in this kind of descending order. And then we're going to use our coefficients a, b, and c, and we're going to plug them into this formula. X is equal to negative b, so whatever sign is here, we're going to flip it, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This, this formula right here is what we call the quadratic formula. I will say this is extremely important, and I will suggest that you memorize it. Now, you might not be used to this plus or minus notation. We're just going to take a look. When we solve something, we're going to use, we're going to, we're going to actually both add and subtract. So we're going to end up with two different answers for most of the work we're going to do. So let's say we've got something that, let's say that we have something that we may or may not be able to solve. I'm going to take an equation like 2x squared minus 4x, or sorry, is equal to negative 4x plus 3. So first thing that we're going to do is say we should move all of our terms to one side. So here I'm going to go ahead and add 4x to both sides. So I've got my 2x squared. What am I doing? So I'm going to add 4x. I'm also going to subtract 3. So now over here on the right, I'm just going to have 0. Over here on the left, I've got 2x squared plus 4x minus 3. So looking at this, I've got a is equal to 2, b is equal to 4, and c is going to be negative 3. And we're just going to plug this into this quadratic equation, or this quadratic formula. So we've got, my answer was going to end up being negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that means I'm going to have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 3, so it's negative 3, all over 2 times 2. And now we have to work on simplifying this, but our order of operations is going to take over. So I'm going to end up with negative 4, plus or minus. This is going to be the square root of 16. I notice I've got a minus and a minus, so this is going to be a plus. 8 times 3 is going to be 24. All of that's over 4. And I need to just keep, and I can keep going as to simplify this. So this is going to end up being, what do we have? It's going to be negative 4 plus or minus the square root of, it's like 40 over 4. And now I can simplify this radical. And just thinking about that, that's going to be 4 times 10. So it's going to be 2 square roots of 10. So this is going to be negative 4 plus or minus 2 square roots of 10 all over 4. And I can do a couple things to simplify this now. One of the ways I could do this is I could say, oh, I've got a greatest common factor of 2 up top. So I could take a 2 out. That'll leave me with 2 times negative 2 plus or minus my square root of 10 all over 4. And then I can reduce. So I would end up with negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 10 all over 2. And that would be good. And I could think of this as negative 2 plus the square root of 10 divided by 2, or negative 2 minus the square root of 10 over 2. Now, some people don't like simplifying with this factoring. So this is simplifying. Here we're doing that sort of greatest common factor factoring here. If you don't want to do that, we could also split our term to simplify this. And this would be saying, okay, I've got these two things in my numerator, so that would be negative 4 over 4, and then plus or minus, I got this 2 square roots of 10 over 4. And with this, I could say, oh, that's going to be negative 4 over 4, that's just negative 1, plus or minus, oh, here, that cancels out. Square root of 10 over 2. These two things are the same. You could either split your term, or you could factor out a greatest common factor. And these are exact answers. If I were to plug this into a calculator, this would give me some decimal answers. So whatever you're doing, this is still a good technique to use, whether you need an exact answers or if we were to plug it into a calculator and figure out some decimal answers. Let's do another one. And I'm going to show you one of the nice things about the quadratic formula. Having a quadratic formula is nice because it allows you to answer things that would otherwise be very, very difficult to handle in any other circumstance. So here is one of the things that we can do. Say we've got something that looks a little bit more like, okay, let's do something that looks a little bit like this. How about I've got 1/2 r squared is equal to 1 over 6r minus 2/3. That looks dreadful, doesn't it? Well, what we're going to do is I'm just going to go through and multiply through by our common denominator. I could, in fact, if I wanted to, move everything over right now, but we can also do things like clear our fractions. With our common denominator. So what I'm going to do here is I will go ahead and multiply everything by, looks like a 6, because that's our common denominator. So here I'm going to end up with 3r squared, and I'm going to distribute this. This is going to be is equal to 1r, and that's going to be 3 goes into 6 2 times. 2 times 2 is a 4. So I'm going to have 3r squared is equal to 1r minus 4. Now that we're here, we can go ahead and, oops, I'm going to move all of our terms to one side. I've got 3r squared minus r plus 4 is equal to 0. And once again, we can solve from here. It's like a is equal to 3. B is equal to -1, and C is equal to 4. So in this case, it's not x, it's going to be r is equal to -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm going through this fairly quickly, but you could pause the video and go back and hopefully take some notes if you need to. So this is going to be -1 plus or minus the square root of -1 squared minus 4 times 3 times 4. Something interesting is going to happen here. Now, one thing I do want you to note is we're going to you have to watch your signs. Negative times negative is positive. So even though, as I've seen some folks decide that, oh, this is already a -1, it'll stay a -1. No, we're taking the opposite of whatever this is. Also, notice that when we substitute in, I use a set of parentheses. That helps us keep this sign straight, because -1 squared is going to be a +1. This is going to be 1, and this is going to be minus. Ooh, what do I have? That's going to be 12. 12 times 4 is 48 over a 6. Here I'm going to end up with r is equal to 1 plus or minus the square root of -47 over 6. And sure enough, I don't have a real number here. This is going to be r is equal to 1 plus or minus, I'll think of this as I square roots of 47 over 6. Your answers don't always have to be real. And you could think of this as 1/6 plus I square roots of 47 and over 6, or 1/6 minus I square roots of 47 over 6. Alrighty, that's what we got.